And then in March, we have 2 in-person meetups. We have one in New York City, and we've got one in Atlanta with Dominique Wilkins, the Hall of Fame basketball player from the Atlanta Hawks,
Wow.
which is always a ton of fun. But, our kickoffs to me are like, they're sacred. So 2 years ago, we kicked off the year with the real Rudy Rudiger from the movie Rudy, and he was tremendous. Last year, we kicked off with the legendary Layla Ali, and this year we had a decision to make, and to me, it was a no-brainer to pick Super Frenchie because of all the people that I met last year. I don't know, you might be the most unique guy that I met. And I just, you have these people that come into your life and you like literally fall in love with them instantly. And that was the case here. So for anybody who's new to a Legend Series call, let me just kind of go quickly through how it works. So we're going to do a quick fireside chat, like 30 minutes. And then we're going to open it up for live Q&A. So if you have a question for Super Frenchie, just put in the comments that you've got a question. You don't have to write it out. And then I will tee you up and you can ask your question to the one and only Matthias Super Frenchie Giraud. He is a 2-time world record holder. He's a professional skier and a base jumper. And then I could go on and on and on and on, but we're going to kind of get into that stuff. So I'm not going to give the laundry list of accolades because it would probably take us about a half an hour. We've got an intro ready. So Kathy, hit it.
I don't fit in the box, I was born to stand out. Living life on my terms, I've erased all doubt. With passion in my heart and the lightning cutting through the sky. Welcome to the top where the fearless reign. What the doubters did say. Hold on, the cream of the crop. Bodacious and bold. Welcome to the top. Welcome to the top. Bodacious, audacious, no ceiling, no end. Loquacious, vivacious, where legends ascend. No chains, no block, this is my moment. Welcome to the top. Welcome to the top.
Welcome, my friend.
Thanks for having me.
Dude, I am so excited about this. This is going to be a lot of fun. Let's get started with this Super Frenchie name. Let's just get that out of the way. Where in the world did that come from? What's the origin story for your moniker and also the title of one of your documentaries that you got to fasten your seatbelts if you sit down to watch Super Frenchie, the documentary. But tell us the story.
I wish I could have come up with it. It's a funny nickname, but I just moved to the US in Colorado, Durango, Colorado. I moved from the Alps to Colorado. I kind of had this dream of being a pro skier, but I didn't think it was going to happen. I was able to go to business school in Colorado and ski at the same time. So I was like, I'm going to find my way in the ski industry and make it happen somehow. Within 3 weeks of moving there, they had a big air competition. A big air is like a big kicker in the terrain park, and you do tricks and stuff like that. And I had blown my knee already once and broken my sternum about 4 times. So I wasn't really doing, a lot of park skiing at that time anymore. But, I could do a few tricks. And all my friends were entering the competition. And I was like, they were like, hey, man, come and ski with us. I was like, I don't really do much park. They're like, all right, Frenchie, you got to do it. I was like, all right, cool. So I get in there, and, it's one of those magical moments when everything clicks. And I just drop in and try tricks that I'd never even tried, like skiing backwards and doing a backflip, or like doing like a a backflip with a 90 degree and finishing with a front flip with 90 degrees, landing switch and all these things. And then the crowd is, kind of getting pretty amped, and that's getting me amped. And then I get back, we get towed by snowmobiles to get back to the top to do more runs faster. And I'm about to drop for another run, and this guy puts a makeshift like French flag around my neck, and it looked like a cape. And I'm like, damn, that looks awesome. I should do a Superman front flip with this. So I just dropped in, did a big laid out Superman front flip over the crowd, had the flip turn around, stomped the landing. The crowd went nuts, grabbed the snowmobile, went back up for another run. And then the announcer goes, ladies and gentlemen, here comes number 73, Super Frenchie. Everybody started screaming. I did a Superman front flip again, got third at the competition, and then the nickname stuck.
I love it.
So
love it.
That's how it was born. It was pretty much, I just arrived in the US and just kind of, discovering this amazing place, discovering Colorado, and then right away feeling welcome, accepted, and just kind of making my mark, And I remember actually my American mentor at the time, Jeffrey McDonald. He was a wonderful man, a hardcore businessman from Boston who helped me move to the US. And a couple of times he heard me introducing myself as Super Frenchie, because most people can't remember or pronounce Matthias Giraud. That's the French way of saying my name. So Super Frenchie was much easier. And then I remember one day he took me to the side and he was like, stop calling yourself Super Frenchie. It's childish. It doesn't do you any favor. And he passed away now. I wish he could still be alive and be like, dude, this actually has become a brand.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Oh my God. So take us back to little Super Frenchie. How did you grow up? Where did you grow up? How did you grow up? Did you have any aspirations as a kid? Did you even dream of what you'd be doing today?
And that is, so I had my first, maybe it's because I'm French, but I had my first existential thoughts when I was 4. And this is when I really realized that the only thing we have in life that is substantial, we don't know what comes next. There's the hypothesis of potentially a paradise or a God or this or that. And I'm not bringing down, people's beliefs, but it's, as a child, growing up in this environment, it sounded very vague. And I just knew that I loved skiing so much in the mountains. And I grew up in the Alps part-time. I was just going there on vacation. And you hear about all these mountain legends doing all these amazing things that had never been done. And I started skiing at 18 months old. And so skiing there, I never thought I'd be the guy doing first descents or jumping off things with a parachute. But as my skills progressed and you witness people doing stuff like that in the Alps, then it doesn't seem out of reach. And eventually, I went to ski academy and started, becoming a ski racer. And I think I know I'm doing flips of cliffs and somehow, making it with some injuries, but I keep carrying on. And one piece falls into place one after another. And eventually what you think was completely unattainable is gradually becoming feasible. You don't necessarily think you're going to do it yourself, but as you progress, then you realize, oh my God, this is what I can do. And so it was this gradual approach. But I was that kid that I was busy. I always had a plan in mind. Childhood was honestly it's going to sound maybe a little harsh, but childhood was almost a burden for me because I knew what I wanted to do. And I had to go through all the steps to be gradually emancipating. And I couldn't wait to be an adult and do the life that I wanted, and live the life that I wanted to live. I was just like, I'm wasting time here. Like I got school out of the way. I went to business school. I did everything I got to get that, to get these requirements off my back, Especially, I grew up in a family where my dad was a doctor. My older sister speaks 7 languages and an engineer in aeronautics. My other sisters, one is a lawyer. The other one had a master's in history and literature. And then you have the last kid, and your parents are like, what do you want to do? Oh, I want to ski and be a carpenter in the Alps. They're like, you gotta go to school. So I kind of made it a mission to show them that I think having the heavy, family expectation to follow an academic path and all this stuff, and I'm not talking badly about education. I think it's very crucial to be knowledgeable and educated, but I wanted to show them that I could carve my own way into this world, and it happened,
You know, there's very few people that can say that they are considered a pioneer, but you don't get featured on 60 Minutes and Good Morning America unless you're a pioneer. So tell us a little bit about the draw. So you are doing some extreme technical skiing, but you said let's let's couple that with base jumping. How did that combination come to you and you then becoming this pioneering figure in that world?
So there were two things. First, I was 9 years old, and there's a movie that came out that was called Pushing the Limits. Classic 90s movie, about extreme people doing extreme things. But the difference about this movie, it was actually the lead character was played by an American named Mark Twight. Mark Twight is an amazing mountain rider, and he was a big climber, did a lot of first ascents, and the character that he embodied in that movie, the character he played was called Giraud Copeland. And Giraud Copeland is kind of like the leader of that pack that lived in a remote refuge in the Alps, and they were all steep skiers, snowboarders, skydivers. They would bungee jump, and they were true images of the first ski base jumps. And I was 9 years old, and I saw that, and I was already drawn to parachutes. My dad did his military service in the French paratroopers, so I grew up with, and he was born in 1939 as well. He's a war child, so I grew up with war stories and his stories of him, parachuting. And my sister was a certified pilot at 15 years old, so we did have a little bit of a penchant for air stuff in my family. So I always knew parachutes were, at 4 years old, I'd make like parachutes and throw them off the balcony with plastic bags and my GI Joe. So I was always drawn to that stuff. But then when I saw these images, it was incredible. And what was more important is that the characters in this movie, they were not just extreme guys doing extreme stuff. They had ethos. Their ethos was everything. Their beliefs and aspirations enabled them to do extremely audacious, daring things. And it was the first time that I saw adults. When you're a child, are supposed to be, professional, poised, have their shit together. They drive nice cars, they have a house, they raise kids. But these guys lived their lives on their own terms. And for me, as a 9-year-old kid, I was like, oh my God. And there's so much social weight in France. You have a lot more. I think you have a lot more daily social freedom than in the US because there are less rules. The US is a fantastic country. I'm not saying it's bad, but things are more regulated here. Europe, you have a little more, it's more free flowing, right? You can be 14 years old and drink a beer on the street on a skateboard and nobody's going to say anything, So you could kind of do whatever you want, but there's a lot of, the weight of tradition is heavy in France. And these guys were they weren't even just breaking out of the box. They were creating a whole new box. And it's like, this is the life I want to live. They cracked the code of living. They established a standard that is so out there that people might not necessarily be able to relate to it, but they live a true life of épanouissement. Épanouissement in French means extreme blooming and fulfillment. And for me, that's what I saw as, I can put adult words on this now, but as a child, this is what I felt. We often feel our way there before we can think our way there, right? And this is what it felt like. And when I saw that movie, it was just an epiphany. I was like, this is what I'm going to do with my life. I belong to this tribe. I just need to earn my spot. And so then, yeah, that's it. Then I was on my way. So
Good.
Yeah.
So John McCaskill, who's a part of the Outlier Project and a Navy SEAL,
Oh, John, yeah.
he introduced us, and so I remember we had our first conversation. You were in the car. I was so fired up after we talked that night. Meg and I, my wife, we watched Super Frenchie, the documentary, and I think literally she was looking away at points because the stuff you do is so crazy. And we talked about this in your feature in Outlier magazine. I think a lot of people would think you're fearless. but
Oh,
that's really not true. Tell us, because we all, no matter what we do, whether you base jump off of mountains or whether you are an entrepreneur, you have to face fear. Tell us about your relationship with fear and how you overcome those natural inclinations to try to protect yourself to do the things that light you up.
well, so this might surprise you, but first of all, I'm the most afraid person you probably ever meet in your life. I'm an overthinker, and in case you haven't noticed it already, I'm an over-explainer. I overthink, over-explain, and it takes me so much to gather the strength to do this stuff. I'm not gonna lie, it's very, very difficult. So I'm not fearless, but my relationship, I've always been obsessed with fear at the same time. It's an interesting duality, and my relationship with fear has definitely evolved throughout the years. You know, as a child, trying to live up to the example that I set for myself through pushing the limits, you know, through Gregor Copeland. These guys were gods, you know, and I was so far from them. I had to learn to be able to. Again, I had to earn my grade to be part of their tribe, and for me, at first, he was just like, "All right, toughen up, man. You know, you're scared, just go for it anyway." So I kind of pushed fear aside, right? And then eventually, as I started doing things and, you know, jumping, you know, 30, 50, 60-foot cliffs, 90-foot cliffs on skis, then strapping on parachutes, jumping out of planes, and then doing extreme skiing competitions and doing backflips of 50-foot cliffs. And, you know, through mainly skydiving, actually, I started to kind of try to manage my fear, if you can call it like that, but it was mainly just trying to handle my anxiety. And then eventually I realized that actually fear is a superpower. Fear is the only emotion that will um, force you to channel all your abilities, all your skills, all your capabilities to reach your goal. It's either a blocker or an enabler, and fear for me unleashes superpowers. And then eventually I got to the point where I learned to not only embrace fear in the mountains, but let all emotions kind of run their course through, let them do what they're supposed to do. And I always say when I climb, I feel my fear in my forearms. I feel like I'm starting to connect with my environment, and I'm really scared, but my anxiety starts to, you know, lower. It's kind of like a up and down. It gets a little smaller and smaller and smaller. And I feel a journey on the climb to a jump on the hike there. And by just kind of letting fear run through my body, breathing it in. Breathing is super important. You know, it sounds like a hippie thing, but it literally has like physiological effect. I think the oxygenation of your body coupled with visualization of your actions is extremely liberating, and you fully develop this presence while being omnipresent. So you are there during the action, but you also, I always call it a horizontal like mind expansion. It feels like my brain grows this way, and fear enables to do that. It sucks every time trying to get in that mode, because the transition phase is super uncomfortable every time, because acceptance doesn't come easily, just like, you know, losing somebody or going through a hard moment, you know. And but I think fear is really what has taught me probably the biggest mountain lesson I've learned over my 20 plus year career, is that conditions are what they are, not what you want them to be. So you have to react and adapt, but not lose sight of your heading, you know, your azimuth, you know, your what is your heading on your compass, where are you going? Then you're going to find a way to get there only by adapting to your environment. And this is it's a long answer, but this is what fear has enabled me to do. So
No, it's so good and it's so important. You know, one of the things I think, you know, for surface level, people are like, this guy is crazy. Like he is just balls to the wall and just like, you know, haphazardly doing all this stuff. But one of the things that struck me, well, it strikes me every time we talk, is you are really a brilliant guy. You're super smart,
I
but
fooled you.
your preparation the way that you prepare, even the way that you prepared for this, like, so, you wanted a sense of like, okay, how is this going to work? You didn't just kind of like, okay, I'm going to just show up and have no idea what the format is. Like, you wanted to know that. And in, getting to know you and kind of seeing how you prepare for these projects, it's incredible, your attention to detail. How important is preparation to you?
Well, well, thank you for recognizing that. And it's also preparation is everything, especially for a guy like me, because I have zero talent to begin with. You know, I'm a fairly coordinated and athletic guy. I can endure, you know, physical and emotional stress. I have that ability to do that. I'm aware. But skiing, I was not meant to be a good skier. First of all, my mother's Dutch, my dad from southwest of France. I was just a vacation skier. I arrived in ski academy at 13, really late, you know, skiing with kids that, you know, their parents were ex-World Cup champions or Olympians. And I'm there, just this tall, lanky, Dutch-looking guy who can't even link two turns correctly, you know? But the only way I realized that the only way for me to get to my goal was to pay attention to the details. You know, I always say success is in the vision, survival is in the details. And you wouldn't believe how many of my friends have died because of a detail. I have two friends that died because of a piece of string this big on their parachute, you know, base jumping. And it's ridiculous. And so I'm not willing to not reach the apogee of my life or to have my life end because of a freaking detail, you know. So I'm more of like I think there are analytical minds and there are minds that are really good at making a synthesizing everything. I'm more like a synthesis guy. But because I want to succeed, I force myself to dive into analysis. But I go from the broad picture first and then work through the details. Because if I do it the other way around, I'm overwhelmed and I'm not going to do it. It's like climbing a mountain, you know. Keep the summit in mind, but don't have object fixation. You know, first get to refuge 1, refuge 2, then the summit push. But then you got to ski down the mountain and then potentially jump off of it too. So
you've talked very publicly about a pretty sensitive topic, and that's your sister BB's passing.
yeah.
Just explain to us kind of how that impacted your life and your mindset at that moment.
So reframing, my older sister, Mary Isabel, is 12 years older than me. And then I had 2 middle sisters, 9 years older, Anouk and her twin sister, BB. And then I was the last one, kind of like the the accident, the devil's reject, you know, like the wild child. And so I was always, you know, out doing my own thing and all that. But, you know, I pretty much grew up with I say 3 mothers because we didn't necessarily have a very nurturing mom, but my sisters really took care of me. And when I was 18 years old, one of my sisters, you know, suffered with depression for years, and one day she jumped out of her window in Paris, you know, and ended her life. And I was the only child at home at that time. I had blown my knee. It was my first season-ending injury while in business school. So I was went through surgery, PT, and I was working at a greenhouse factory that summer, and all my sisters were gone. And then we get the call that BB, you know, killed herself. And I was 18 years old, and all of a sudden, is it boom? You know, end of your teenage child years. You know, boom, you're an adult. You know, I had to call the cops, book the appointment at the mortuary, announce the news to my sisters. That was the worst thing ever. When someone dies, being the messenger is crushing. Then recognize the body, do all this stuff. So yet at that time, while it was the most traumatic experience at that time, it was probably the most empowering experience of my life and it was really on the way of coming back from her funeral. It's like I was there, but almost like a spectator of the scene while being there at the same time, you know, that detachment. And I realized something very, very, very clear struck me at the time that, and I'm able to put words from, you know, more eloquently on this now because I've read things like Viktor Frankl, things like that. But essentially, what she didn't have was a why beyond her suffering. She didn't have something to power through the difficult time now because she wanted to get somewhere else. She was, she spoke 5 languages. She was incredibly smart. Her intelligence was way beyond, her IQ was way beyond my IQ. Like I'm just the dumb little brother who just likes to jump off stuff and ski. She was, master's in history, master's in literature. She was going to get a master's in journalism. She had all this stuff, and but she didn't have these what I call existential pillars, the foundations of her existence, and I had them. No matter how trivial they may be, I knew which mountains I wanted to ski. I knew I had a goal to rehab my knee because there were things I wanted to do in the mountains. I wanted to base jump. I do surf a little bit. You can see one of my boards there, but I wanted to surf big waves. My goal was to surf a 10-meter wave, which I've been able to do a couple times now, like a 35-foot wave. And so I had all these goals in place, and I was like, I want to do this. And it sounds maybe dumb to some people, but these were goals past the suffering I was going through right there, And right there, coming back from her funeral, this is the day I signed a pact with myself to commit to my goals, no matter how dangerous. Because she didn't have that. I already had my goals. I already had these pillars in place. All I needed to do was to have the strength and the diligence and the dedication to reach these goals. And so essentially her death was a kick in the ass to just actually create the life that I had set for myself, deep inside in my conscious and subconscious, but that didn't have the courage to trigger yet. So yeah, so I think about that often, and when I crashed in 2013, I had a big crash, spent 3 days in a coma, almost triple fracture my femur. That was 3 weeks before the birth of my son. When I woke up in the hospital, I reminded myself of that. I was like, this is, it's when we fail that our ethos matters the most. It's the foundation of whether we can get back on our feet or not. And I reminded myself of that pact that I signed with myself. And I was like, well, if you base jumping, man, you sign up for the good, you sign up for the bad. You're still alive. Well, you gotta do everything you can to get back on the horse and reach your most audacious objectives, because essentially this is all we have now. We don't have a second chance at living. So that's what her death meant to me.
How do you respond to criticism of people saying, you've got a son, you've got Soren, you've got your, in your early 40s, like, this is irresponsible. How do you think about that criticism?
Well, people are able to and free to believe what they want to believe. But for me, it's my role as a father is to, first of all, keep my child safe, but also have him be exposed to stuff enough that he becomes autonomous and independent as early as possible and has a direction in life too. But also, what is, I think, the most important for, again, to go back to that concept of épanouissement that we talked about earlier, is to have the courage to live your life by your own standards. And what am I going to do? Like, stop what I'm doing because I have a child? No, it's an extra motivation to go even harder. I have to go smarter about this because I have to make sure that I'm coming home. I have a lot on the line, right? I want to help him grow up to be a man, and I want to be there. I want to be, when I'll be, 25 or something like that, I want to be able to call him and be like, hey, pack your skis, we're going to go heli skiing in Italy, or grab your boards, we're going to go to Indonesia for a couple of weeks and surf. I want to be that dad. But in order to be this, I have to lead by example, and I think to be the father that I wanted to be, I need to self-actualize first. If I'm not there accomplishing the goals that I've established for myself, how can I be present at home? There's no way. My mind would be somewhere thinking about what I could have done or what I should have done. And I refuse to live at the conditional tense. Fuck that. It's worthless. And so the biggest value is to live, your life by your own standards. That's the mission I've set for myself. So whether people think it's selfish or not, there's an element of selfishness in the able to have blooming, because it is your life, it is your experience. You live it with your own eyes and your own heart and your own ears and your own body. Yet it's always finding that right balance, for me at least, between maximizing my existence while being there for the people I love as much as possible. That's it.
You've got a lot of outliers on this call, and we're going to have hundreds that watch this on replay. What is your advice for people? Because we're all pushing some boundaries. What's your advice for people about pushing boundaries and truly being an outlier?
Brinksmanship. Learning to find your brink. What's your limit? Establish your limit or find your limit, but then pull back just a little bit. So you're not maxing yourself out so you don't crash and burn. Buy yourself a little more room so you can increase your error margin while maximize your performance. Let's say that's a frame, right? That's your maximum ability. If you're at the middle of the frame, you're at 50-50. That's very average performance. Very high, margin. It's a great place to digest, to repeat, to reboot. But if you operate at 95% or 100%, you're maxed out. So if shit happens, you're gonna either get burned out. You can't keep going. If it's something physical, you'll get too hurt at some point to keep going. Or in the world of base jumping, you're dead. So pull back just a little bit so you can maximize, but still have some buffer in there. That's what I think. It's about brinksmanship is finding your limit and not only respecting it, but knowing how to position according to your limit. But the beautiful thing about this, if you spend as much time as possible maximizing your performance while having that safety margin, if you operate at 80% most of the time, then your 80% at some point becomes someone else's 95% through iteration. That's I guess that's my tip.
Hopefully you guys are understanding why I have so much admiration for this guy. Holy Moses. So I obviously I could ask you questions till the cows come home, but we've got a lot of people that want to ask you a question. You ready, my friend?
I'm ready. Fire away. I love it. Thank you.
We're going to, so this guy just spent 23 years in the Air Force and he just retired.
Wow.
For the Air Force. So he's in one of those interesting transition periods. So Martin Foster in Dayton, you're up with Super Frenchie.
I feel like I'm on the Price is Right, or I get the call down. Martin Foster, come on down. Hey, first and foremost, Scott, your questions were on point. Like, just bravo to you, sir. Like, you asked some excellent questions. Just want to give you that public feedback. Super Frenchie, just thank you so much for being here. It's hard to follow up Scott, but just one question I had for you was, what's the biggest lie high performers tell themselves about courage? Thanks for taking my question.
Thanks for asking. The biggest lie, quitters don't quit. Fuck that. Sometimes you got to turn around and come back another day, And when I climb a mountain, when I crashed, I was 80% committed to jumping before I even got to the top of the mountain. That was unsustainable. Now, when I climb a mountain, there's a 50% chance I'm going to get it done, and the 50% chance I'm going to have to turn around. It's not a question of desire or will or performance. It's a question of positioning according to your environment. That's my answer.
Oh, good.
Pretty short to the point. Thank you, Martin. I appreciate it.
I love it. Jared in Philly, we're going to you.
Hey, Super Frenchie. Nice to meet you. This has been an awesome hour. So if you're anything like me, I almost prefer to be the person in the dangerous scenario as opposed to watching a loved one be in that. So out of curiosity, as your kid grows up, are you hoping that he gravitates towards these more extreme experiences, or are you hoping that you don't have to watch him do some of those crazy jumps?
I'm already screwed. He was dropping vert ramps on a skateboard at 6 years old. So
yeah, it doesn't fall from the tree, huh?
He doesn't have the desire. He's a really good skier already, but he doesn't have a desire to be a pro skier. I think he sees that it is a life that never ends. He sees his dad waking up early, training every day. Everything that I do is aligned. Everything I eat, everything I do, everything I manage is aligned towards my goals. And I think he appreciates that, but he doesn't want this to be tied to the physical realm for him. But he loves extreme sports. I know he wants to skydive, which I'm totally cool with that. He used to kind of have a desire to base jump, doesn't really anymore, and I would never push that on him. Yet, if he wants to base jump, I will do it my duty to teach him, because I know I can teach him things that will help him survive. Would I love to fall off a cliff and look at my son in the eyes in free fall and just be stoked? Absolutely, that would be an amazing moment. Yet, if he comes to me and is like, "Dad, I want a base jump," I'm going to be like, "Oh fuck, okay." I'm going to be like, "Okay, give me a week to digest, and then we'll circle back." So I can't be a hypocrite.
That's an awesome example you're setting for him. Appreciate it.
The other thing, I will take that to the next level. It sounds very dark and very horrible, but as a base jumper, you hope for the best and you plan for the worst all the time. I've accepted being the last one standing, no matter what. I've accepted that in life I could lose everybody that I love around me, and so I'm preparing myself for that already too.
Such an interesting mindset. We're going to California. Tanya Boggs, who is a phenomenal photographer. Tanya, you're up.
Hi, Happy New Year, everybody, and thank you for joining us and talking to us today. Very interesting. I am, first of all, in agreement about how you live your life as an
Thank you.
example for your children, because my daughter has been behind a lot of choices that I've made to live fully so that she has an example.
Awesome.
But my question is, I was really intrigued by your thoughts about the existential pillars. So I'm curious what you consider to be your existential pillars.
Well, I think at first, existential pillars are going to change or evolve through life, I would say. As a child, you're very self-centered and you focusing on, well, that's all you do, right? You're developing yourself, you're blooming, you have people helping you. And so for me, obviously, and for a long time, and that's a great question, by the way. Thanks for noticing, Martin. I appreciate that. I think it sounds trivial. As a kid, all I wanted to do was I just wanted to ski. It's pretty one-dimensional, right? But I do think, obviously, as you evolve in life, you have responsibilities, and then things change. And I pondered a lot on that after my crash, and I was like, well, what are one of the lessons I learned actually from a friend who was an ex-fighter pilot was to avoid decision fatigue. Decision fatigue is when you have too many options at your fingertips and you don't know which choice to make. It affects your decision making. Say going to a restaurant, you have 25 things on the menu. You're like, oh my God, what am I gonna get? It looks so good, but I don't know what to choose. If they put 5 things on the menu, you're probably gonna pick that one thing. Be like, I'm stoked, I'm gonna get this. And I think the same thing can be applied to life. So to go back to the existential pillars, is I think if we identify the key elements in our existence, then we've identified our existential pillars. And my existential pillars now are my old ones, or an element of my actual existential pillars, but they're not the only ones anymore. I would say if I could identify 3 ones right now, it would be obviously my vocation. And I can englobe that into one word, because that's skiing, that's climbing, that's jumping, that's being a mountaineer, that's being, even surfing big waves occasionally, that's training, that's eating well, that's a vocation. Luckily, I have a vocation that englobes a lot of this, pretty broad, that englobes a lot of valuable stuff. But if I can summarize it in one thing, my vocation. Obviously, fatherhood, because I have a kid. And to be honest, life of a dad is, the daily life of a dad is not that cool, but it finds its value through mentorship, and so that's why fatherhood is very important, because you're guiding someone else. It's not just putting food on the table anymore. It becomes a noble cause because you're passing something on and guiding someone. And third of all, I'm French, I'm romantic, true love. These are my 3 existential pillars. But if you think of your existential pillars, right, these are hard things. Can you extract your philosophical pillars out of this? And I reflected on that, years ago, and I was like, okay, these are very tangible things, right? Like your loved ones, your job, this and that, but your passion, it's more than a job, right? But what are, I guess, the 3 values, or the 3 philosophical pillars to live by? And for me, obviously passion is very important because it's the fire in our heart. It's what makes us want to get out of the bed in the morning and get going. But then a passion without a direction is pointless. So you do need to have purpose, a direction, something to channel your passion. But then you got to be efficient about this. So it's kind of like that, what I call that. They're my magical 3 Ps, I guess, that I've established myself. Then you got to be pragmatic. Once again, conditions are what they are, not what you want them to be. So you got to react and adapt to your environment. And so I try to live in accordance with my 3 existential pillars and my 3 philosophical pillars.
Great answer. Thank you.
These are
Thank
like
you.
mic drop answers. Jeez. We're going to Detroit. One of my favorite entrepreneurs, Carl McAllister.
Hey, good afternoon and happy New Year, everyone. Great conversation and insight, by the way, Super Frenchie. I
Thanks,
did
Carl.
have the question of the pillars, but since you already answered that, I had to quickly pivot to another question.
Nice. That you're reacting and adapting to your environment right there. You're already a Brinksman. You get this.
Absolutely. So my second follow-up question is, were you ever forced to pivot on something? And if you did, how did you handle it?
Can you repeat it? I just want to make sure I absorb every single word.
So, if were you ever forced to pivot on something, like make a last minute change or redirection? And if so, how did you handle it?
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Is that applied mainly to sports or the mountains or life in general?
Both.
Both. Okay. Great. Great question. So I think the ability, one of the abilities that are, one of the things that recurring he had to use through my personal life and professional life is reframing. If the frame doesn't suit you, well, destroy the frame and create a new frame or adjust the frame. And it's happened to me when I travel halfway across the world to do a project. I've climbed the mountains all night. I'm on top of the mountain and conditions are not good, or it's not feasible, or it's not how I envisioned it. So I'm like, well, I got to turn around. I'm not going to carry on with this just because I set it as a goal. Then it becomes delusional, But then, personal level, I think the most powerful example I could bring is so the mother of my child is no longer my wife, and we went through, because when I crashed was 3 weeks before the birth of our son. It was very, very difficult for her to. We hung on for about 10 years after, but just there was no blooming for her. There was no blooming for me. You know what I mean? And so there comes a point where you got to have the courage to refrain. You're holding each other back. You are stifling each other. And so that's an example of reframing that I had to do, I think, in my private life. But I think, if you, that's in Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. Viktor Frankl really hammers out the concept of cognitive reframing. So not only establishing a new frame, but actually shifting and leveraging a negative or something negative or harmful as a positive, and a springboard for something else. And I think that's an ability that needs to be practiced, and that we cannot approach with hubris or complacency, but it's the ability to cognitively reframe, because I think that serves us very well on the personal or professional or personal or whatever element. It's a very important thing. So does that answer your question?
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that.
Okay. Thank you.
Oh, good. We're going back to California. So I always say Robert Hamilton Owens makes the Dos Equis guy look boring, because he is the most interesting man in the world. Robert was a PJ, Special Forces PJ in the Air Force in his 20s. And at 72, rode 40 some odd days in a row across the Atlantic Ocean. And at 73, ran 40 miles on a new knee at whatever it was, 2:00 in the morning when we went to Running Man. So he is a unique character. And he is actually the guy who introduced me to our mutual friend, Chuck Patterson.
Oh, no way.
So
That's amazing. Well, first of all, I'm intimidated. Second of all, it's like that the Legend series should be on him, not me.
we've had him on many, many times. So
all right.
You're up.
I'll tell Chuck hi for you. He lives down the street.
Awesome, sweet. Yeah, Chuck is my brother, man. Give him a big hug for me.
You see that new video of him doing Nazare?
I know.
Steve?
I did, was he on skis at Nazaré?
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
oh,
just did it.
what a kook! I love this guy.
You know, I have my question is, you have your 100%, and then you have your 80% buffer.
Yep.
And how do
Well,
you know? How do you know what the 20% is of the 80% where you say, I'm going to back off just a little bit?
yeah, that's a very good question. Obviously, I'm not in a cockpit. I'm not flying a plane where I have all these gauges and markers and I know what I have in my fuel tank. All this is very approximative and subjective, right? Yet we all know when you do something long enough and you repeat it a lot, you know where you stand based on your performance, just naturally, right?
Right.
And this is a great example, for example, that I would have to gauge that is when we base jump, when you jump off a cliff and you have ground rush, the ground is coming at you and you haven't opened your parachute, you don't have an altimeter. Skydiving, you do, you're jumping at 12,000 or 13 or 14,000 feet and you have essentially a watch that tells you how high or how low you are and you kind of know when to pull your parachute, right? But when you're base jumping, you have to develop your biological altimeter. And I think the only way to develop that sense of brinksmanship, to know where you stand based on your performance, yeah, if it's 75 or 80%, roughly about the same. It's kind of like a ballpark, right? But when you're maxed out, when you can't ski any faster and you're barely holding on, that for sure. But you also know when you're just chilling and you still have a lot of gas under the tank. So I think repetition and immersion brings you that understanding of self and the environment. I think repetition brings self-calibration. And so I'm able to establish that through self-calibration. And self-calibration is personal assessment of skills and desire and environmental assessment as well, in order to be able to position accordingly. Does that answer it?
Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. Thanks, Robert.
You guys got to hang out at some when I don't know, when you're with Chuck or something, you guys got to hang out sometime.
Chuck, man, this guy, I love this guy. So much energy. And the biggest smile I've ever seen in my life.
All right, we're going to Florida. Jason, you're up.
Hey, Super French, how are you?
I'm doing great, and you?
I'm doing great. Speaking of energy, I love your energy. Absolutely contagious.
Thank you.
Mine is a kind of two-part, little less serious questions. One, are there other extreme sports? You mentioned Chuck, so it was great lead in RHO there. Do you ever look at another extreme sport? Clearly, fear, you mentioned, is one of your strengths, overcoming, managing that. And you're like, no way in heck. Like, I look at that guy like, that's insane. One, and my other backup is, are there leisure activities like normal people like me do, that golf and other things? Obviously, you probably don't have time with being a dad and doing these crazy other things, but are there leisure things that you actually do, or is it just too boring for you because there's no fear involved in those sports?
So if I was chasing fear, I would be chasing the rush. Chasing the rush would make me an adrenaline junkie, which I absolutely despise, So because it's a junkie ride, you're just chasing a thrill. For me, I'm chasing fulfillment, purpose, meaning, through actions. I don't jump to jump. I jump with a goal in mind, a purpose in mind. I'm obsessive. I let my objectives turn to obsession to be able to reach them. But therefore, when I come home, I also need to reboot. Home is a base camp. And this is when you need to eat well. I love cooking. I bake my own bread as a Frenchman, surprising. I do love to read. I don't read enough, but I try to read as much as possible. I'm slowly working on a book. So I try to develop that lexical field, because I think it doesn't all have to be super gnarly stuff all the time, because obviously that's also a recipe to eventually burn out. And the greatest pressure we experience is the pressure we put on ourselves. Yet, this said, to enjoy the everyday life there's a time of adjustment when I come back. I used to think there was a problem with me because I would go and experience my life apogees, in the mountains. And in many ways, it's base jumping, skiing off gnarly mountains, things like that, just doesn't give a chance to everyday life at first. And I used to think that, I just, yeah, there was maybe an internal problem with me, that I would experience kind of like that blue Monday after big projects, things like that. But it's normal. You have to come down after a big high. And again, this is not why I chase the high. I don't care about the high, but it is a byproduct and it's part of it, and it must be managed and acknowledged, right? I think that's why in the 90s, a lot of pro surfers, there was a huge drug wave through the pro surfing community. Guys would be on tour, and then when they went surfing, they were all cracked out on the beach, freaking high in ecstasy and stuff. Guys like Marco Chilupo was a great example of that, and a bunch of other guys. And so you have to learn to manage that Blue Monday, redigest, reboot. And so when I'm home, I just, I live a pretty monotonous life. I wake up, take care of my kid, train, do a cold plunge, go skiing, do my emails, work on the book, and that's kind of what I do. The things I set goals for myself when I come home that might not have anything directly to do with action stuff, but that helps shape the mind for it. Is that does that
No,
answer
super
it?
helpful. No, really appreciate it. No, thank you so much.
No, it's funny, guys. I never had to word it this way, so that was a challenging question. Thank you, because I had to make nerve connections and mind connections as I was answering. Thank you.
We're going to Pennsylvania. Kate McKinnon.
Hey, thanks, Scott. And thank you so much, Super Frenchie. This has been amazing. I really appreciate your vulnerability and have just been jotting down a ton of lessons. But
Thank you.
my biggest question is, how do you actually base jump for the first time?
Well, you don't try base jumping. You do it, right? It's like Yoda. There is no try. What does they say? There's do or not do. There's no try, something like that, And to base jump, first you got to skydive. You have to learn to fly your body and to fly your parachute. What is recommended is to do 100 to 200 skydives before you even jump off a bridge. Then once you jumped off a bridge or a very tall cliff, then you can jump over lower cliff, then you can jump over a radio tower, and then a building, something like that. Then you can check off on base jumping stands for building, antenna, span, a bridge, and earth. But the bridge is kind of like the safest object, because if you have an off heading, if your parachute doesn't open the right direction, if it opens backwards, which happens, there's nothing you can hit. When you jump off a cliff, you can slam back into the cliff, which is really bad. I just lost a friend actually December 29th like that, so hit a cliff a bunch of times, and by the time the helicopter showed up, he was done, so you have to, just like being a pilot, we have amazing, Air Force, high military guys with us today that you don't firefight a jet right away. You're gonna learn to fly in a Cessna at first, and that's kind of how you do it for base jumping. My first base jump, my friend, what's beautiful about base jumping, there are base jumping schools, people that teach people how to base jump, but that's been really developed maybe in the last, heavily in the last 10 years. But before that, it was a sport relying on mentorship. You had to have a friend approve of your skills to be able and would agree to teach you. And then I had my friend Jesse Hall, had 600 jumps. Shane McConkey was the first base jumper I met. Shane told me how to get into it. Shane advised me a lot for ski base jumping, but Jesse Hall told me how to pack a parachute and jump off a bridge. But also, I started base jumping. I only had 44 skydives, so I had half or a quarter of the requirement. But I was able to skip some steps because I could already do double backflips on skis and jump off, 50-foot cliffs. So I had that air sense from a cousin discipline. That was not perfect. I'm not saying people should do it, but yet I could use that as a frame of reference to be able to apply to a different environment. Because I think essentially, human endeavor is human endeavor, and the frame of execution remains the same. The only thing that changes are the variables, right? And so I think shifting into base jump, my first day base jumping, I did 9 jumps, and my last jump did a 200-foot gainer off the bridge, and I was like, oh, that's easier than a backflip on skis. I have way more time, and then there's no impact. I'm opening a parachute, and then I can land softly and tiptoe into the landing. So that helped a lot. I think, we all heard of the 10,000-hour rule, right? If you want to be a master at something, you got to put in 10,000 hours, which is roughly like a full-time 4-year job pretty much. Um, but that's my personal theory is I think once you put the 10,000 hour rule, you apply the 10,000 hour rule to one discipline, a cousin discipline might only be 5,000 hours. And another cousin discipline might be only 2,500. So it kind of decreases. For example, you're a professional rock climber. You put your 10,000 hours in rock climbing, you're super strong. You can hold on to little pebbles and climb. But then as you're going to shift into, for example, alpine climbing, so on ice and rocks using crampons and ice axes, different environment, different variables, yet cousin discipline. So you're probably going to progress a lot faster than somebody who starts from scratch straight with alpine climbing. And for example, I had a friend in the French equivalent of the Air Force, Armée de l'Air. He was a fighter pilot, and then he had a car accident. 6 months in a coma, and when he came out of it, he could not physically handle the G-forces of a jet. But his mental ability was still there. All his flying knowledge was still there. So the French military recycled him, if I can say it this way, it's not very glamorous, but into a helicopter pilot. And he was an amazing helicopter pilot. But all his knowledge from flying jets served him so well into flying helicopters. And he was actually, I think, the guy leading the French side of the Desert Storm operation during the Iraqi war, and that was after his 6-month coma. So I think that's kind of how you can damn, I drifted a lot too much, probably too much on that answer. Sorry.
So that's great. Thank you.
I think where you can apply it, guys, is like a lot of us are in transition and like moving from corporate America to entrepreneurship. And I think, Super Frenchie's talking about like, what are those other skills that put us ahead in the game, and how do we apply those to whatever we're going to pursue in the future?
Yeah.
Our cleanup hitter is Hannah in Nashville. Hannah, you're our cleanup hitter. You're up. Did we lose Hannah? We lost Hannah.
We did. We did.
Super Frenchie, man. This was so good. Guys, if you haven't seen his TED Talk, check out his TED Talk. And if you could do me a favor, if you know of anyone looking for a speaker, he is a phenomenal public speaker and obviously very unique. So we've all been to a million conferences and kind of seen the same old, same old. Super Frenchie is not the same old, same old. And I think you've got some room, if I'm not wrong, from our conversation we had the other day. You've got some room for some other keynotes. I know you've got a bunch booked, but
yeah, I got a bunch booked this year, but yeah, I have room for more. And I just did one yesterday, actually, in Eugene for an amazing company called Deployed Logics. They're able to set up like an emergency base camp for military or disaster relief kind of stuff. They can set up a tent that would be 16 by 12 in 60 seconds with 2 people, and use the table to carry the case to carry into like an operation table or whatever. They're amazing, and we had a great chat yesterday, and we talked about again that concept of brinksmanship yesterday, the stages of commitment. We really broke everything down for this sales team, and it was super fun, but also very fulfilling because I could, the sales team was able to share some of the variables they were dealing with, which was so enriching for me to understand their world better and how, again, you can apply your frame of execution from an element to another element, like that. It's that cross-pollination is what makes it super interesting. So, but anyway, I'm going to keep going on another subject. Thank you.
This has been, first of all, the hour flew by. This has been so much fun, and to kick off 2026, you're just the perfect person to do that. So thank you for carving out the time in your busy schedule to join us today. So we've got hundreds and hundreds of members all over the world. What can we do to be a resource to you?
A resource to me? Wow. I have a lot of big audacious projects, on the books right now, and I'm trying to break another world record. I have 3 or 4 first I'm trying to do in the Alps, and then 1 in Nepal, and then 1 potentially in Tibet, but I would need to get a permit in China. So if anybody has connections in China, that would be very helpful, because permits are really hard to get. And the other thing is, if I have room on my parachute right now and headwear for a title sponsor, so if anybody wants to go on some adventures and you know, you and etch their brands in history of mountain sports. Man, that sounds really pompous to say it like that, but you know, you can only do it first once. So if a company wants to be part of some world's first in the mountains, and I'm all ears, and I have a lot of stuff on the books, and I'm just trying to find a way to get there. But these are going to happen no matter what. But if somebody wants to be part of it, that would make it a lot easier. Thank you.
I love it. I love it. We are on it. Thank you, my friend, for joining us. We'll talk again soon. Enjoy the rest of your day and your 2026.
Thank you for having me. Thanks everyone for your questions. Great to meet you. Have a great 2026, and yeah, I'll see you in the mountains.
Thanks, brother.
Thank you so much.